in a charming cafe that is lively with conversation and the slight clinking of cups. A rumpled boy waits at the counter, anxiously looking at his attire, are so ragged that his shoes hardly hold together, but his keen eyes appear to observe something that no one else has. Keanu Reeves sits at an adjacent table, sipping his coffee in silence. Modest presence that blends nicely with the informal setting, yet when the boy unexpectedly comes up to him with an urgent warning, everything is subject to change. What happens next is a sequence of actions that show kindness, bravery, and the truth. One could have anticipated departing. Everyone at the cafe was completely stunned. The cafe was a cozy haven that was bustling with life. A pair conversed on a cold afternoon. The students crouched over hot lattes, over computers, and a barista yelled commands with accustomed ease in the midst of. A homeless boy stayed in a lively atmosphere. His slender figure shivered close to the door. He rubbed his hands together, a little for warmth. The majority of customers dismissed him as only another homeless youth, but the boy's sharp gaze flitted about the room, looking at every face and every nook and cranny. He wasn't here to be fed or consoled, but observing. Sitting at a table in the corner next to Keanu Reeves sat with his coffee by the window, wearing pants and a basic hoodie. His calm demeanor and easy posture made he was nearly undetectable to the other customers. He took a slow sip of his coffee, looking out the window as though absorbed in. Believed the boy's gaze was fixed on Keanu, and his expression changed in some way. He paused, gripping his tiny hands into fists, and then inhaled deeply. And moving, Keanu looked up forward as the boy approached his keen intuition, picking up on the nerve impulses coming from. The boy halted a few steps away from the child. Away, his wide-open eyes darting about as if you're looking for anything more. Pardon me, the boy said in a voice. Keanu raised his voice just above a whisper, put down his coffee, and offered the boy his whole. What's wrong? He inquired in a tone of gentle and serene. The youngster paused, his eyes darting to the other patrons, who were now looking at each other with interest. You shouldn't be here. Their way, he continued. At last, Keanu tilted his voice, wavering. His mind was interested. The boy should have leaned closer to his voice, fading to a whisper. A man has been outdoors, observing you. I believe he's. The serene manner of deadly Keanu didn't falter, but his gaze grew more focused as he thought about what the boy said. And what does he seem to have inquired in a quiet voice, to keep the boy from attracting more attention, as the tall man in a dark coat that has a scar down the side. He has been standing across from his face the road while feigning to read a newspaper, yet he continues to stare in this manner. The boy's voice trembled as he spoke. He wasn't a good guy before, Keanu's. His keen eyes moved to the window, eyes looking out at the street. At first, everyone appeared to be normal, strolling past passing automobiles, but then he noticed a tall, dark-coated man was standing next to him, a lamp post with a newspaper in his hand. Wasn't really looking into the man's eyes. Shifted in the direction of the cafe, and for a moment when their eyes. Keanu's heart rate increased when they met, but his face stayed composed as he turned around. To the young man seeing him. Thank you so much for informing me that he. Ethan the boy, what's your name? Keanu nodded in response. Ethan, you did the. Right now, I need you to remain Please be calm and near me. Ethan nodded with his tiny hands, gripping the table's edge as though Keanu was anchoring himself while he grabbed for. The man outside started to move while using his phone, crossing the street purposefully. Steps, the cafe's tension increased. Keanu quietly moved his chair. He positioned himself between Ethan and the impending danger. What transpired would alter the day's trajectory and abandon everyone in the cafe, doubting all they believed they understood the concepts of generosity, bravery, and fate. The cozy, lively ambience of the cafe changed as the dark-coated man took a step forward. His physique is becoming more commanding with every second that goes by. Ethan's little frame appeared to contract as he held onto Keanu's table, his terrified eyes wide. The hum of conversations around them dwindled and were replaced by an increasing strain that only a little appeared to realize that Keanu was still sitting, kept his cool and reached for his cup, as though nothing strange was taking place in his serene manner, concealing the sharp. His eyes were vigilant without looking. He whispered quietly and directly to Ethan to stay. Okay, right here, regardless of what occurs. With white fingers, Ethan nodded as he held onto the table's edge. Humans. Keanu looked as the boy murmured, coming. Viewing the cafe window's reflection, the man's hand was at the door now. Keanu hovered barely above the grip. Observed the tiny bulge under maybe the man's coat is a concealed weapon. His intuition became more acute. This was an oddity. The door opened, and the man entered his bulky boots. As he searched, it reverberated on the tiled floor. His sharp eyes landed on the room. Almost soon, Keanu simply stood, his presence creating overshadowing the once comfortable cafe. Keanu, his serene gaze as he reclined in his chair. Meeting with the man. Can I assist you? Asked the man in a courteous but strong tone. Grinned and twisted his scar while taking You may say that, he said. Step closer. He grumbled and spoke in a low voice. Reeves, you're difficult to discover that. Ethan's hold on the table has tightened. His petite frame. Keanu shook and reached out, touching the boy's shoulder with a comforting hand, keeping his gaze fixed on the man. I guess you found me, Keanu said in a level tone. The sound of the man's laughter was frigid now. And without humor, we now have a brief conversation. If you don't want these lovely people outside. To hear him make a hazy gesture towards the other clients, some of whom were currently observing the conversation with expanding. Keanu's jaw tensed a little in discomfort. However, his composed demeanor remained unflinching. It's crucial that we can speak here. No need to make a scene, he said. The man's grin wavered and was replaced by a flash of, this isn't the place for annoyance. He snarled, but feel free to play games. I don't mind that, Keanu observed. The man's hand twitches close to his coat. Slight movement that validates his earlier apprehension that this man was hazardous and he wasn't present to. Keanu looked down at Ethan, who was chatting, looking up into his face with a mix of anxiety and trust. The boy had forewarned him. It was his moment to defend. Behind the counter is him, the barista. Anxiously cleared her throat. Everything is okay here, she said in a voice. With a small shudder, Keanu gave her smiling reassuringly, everything's fine. Stated, then returned his focus to. He added a dude, but let's avoid ruining everyone's day. Just say whatever you want to say. The man grinned again, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'll give you credit for your bravery. He told you, but this isn't a. He advanced further in the negotiation, and Keanu then rose to the occasion, appeared to wait for him to. When he stood up straight, his calm presence that suddenly exudes a calm. Keanu, authority, I have no idea who you are. His voice said. Stable, however, if you believe you can enter. You're wrong to come here and threaten me. Ethan looked up at him, terrified. All briefly took the place of the other. Customers looked at each other anxiously, not knowing what was going on, but feeling. As the tension increased, the man's eyes that don't seem ready for Keanu's calmness for a brief minute, it appeared as. Even if he might give in, but Keanu's hand moved and reached into his coat, automatically clutching the side of the. Ethan gasped at the table as he got ready to act. His expression was filled with worry again, wondering what the man pulled out, but there was no weapon. He banged a crumpled photograph. His voice spilled over the table between them, low but brimming with a familiar rage. Keanu looked at the picture of his expression. Anything he saw that was unreadable was sufficient to force him to. The tension was quiet during the downtime in the cafe. Enough thick to sever with a knife. Ethan's wide eyes flitted from Keanu to the man's little hands quivering as Keanu gripped the table and remained silent. Instead, he immediately looked up, meeting. Where did you acquire the man's keen stare? He spoke this in a hushed tone, yet not less solid. The man grinned, thinking that perhaps obtain your. Regardless of what the picture meant, pay attention. Was evident that this was just the start. The strain had just started to disintegrate and reveal the man's arrival was still obscured by darkness. The coffee house appeared to contract as the stress. Suddenly, Keanu Reeves was the center of attention, as well as the enigmatic man facing, similar to opposing forces in an unseen conflict with the creased photo, placed something on the table between them of unsaid importance. Ethan held fast to his startled gaze darted to the edge of the table, between the two men with anxiety. Keanu took a quick look at the picture. Once more, his serene demeanor was betraying only a flash of feeling, a feeling that only someone with Ethan's level of insight could observe. That the picture featured a younger image of the man with his face unharmed. Keanu appeared to be standing next to someone. Know where you got this, Keanu? Queried in a hushed voice, measuring the man's smile remained unwavering, yet there was something flickered in his angry gaze. Or maybe discomfort. That doesn't matter. He stated that your presence is what counts, and you have some debt to me. Responses that the other customers muttered, their interest in one another and rising apprehension among the barista behind the counter appeared prepared to call for assistance. She gripped her with shaking hands. Phone. Keanu inhaled deeply, his piercing, using rapid thinking to put things together. The pieces of this come across you believing I owe you something. His voice was calm but tinged with. The man's sneer vanished as curiosity took its place by a solidified expression that you can't recall, do you? Said in a tone that was almost accusatory. Pointed to the picture of my brother, who was employed. Remarked on one of your movie sets years ago. He had never met a kinder man than you. Claimed that you assisted him when he was at his. Keanu's brow wrinkled at the bottom. Looking for the memories that is yours. What happened, brother? The man's mouth clenched around him, for the first time, he felt confident. Hesitated. "Gone," he said. peacefully passed away a few years ago, but before too. He told me to find you after he departed. You were a trustworthy individual. A person who could assist Keanu's expression melted a mixture of compassion and, crossing his face in comprehension, I'm sorry for your loss, he said. However, why approach and why come here in this manner? The man hesitated, looking at me this way, observing the other patrons before bending in. A little bit, since I don't believe anyone otherwise, he acknowledged, and because I'm in. Keanu's composed manner didn't falter, but his interest. Further on the nature of the difficulty, he asked. Looking over his shoulder, the man looking around the street. People are chasing me outdoors, remarked quietly, dangerous people. Because they believe that I possess something that desire. Ethan, who had been quiet. Suddenly, someone watching the exchange spoke up. Was it the reason you were observing the cafe? Because you were afraid they might discover you. The man's harsh gaze was fixed on the youngster, softening of the expression merely. A little yes, child, he acknowledged that I didn't. Not intending to frighten anyone, I was just attempting to determine how to approach. Keanu leaned without being seen, back a little as his keen eyes take in the nerve system of the man. Language, and you believed I might assist him, said more of a declaration than a. The man nodded in response to my brother's query. Constantly claimed that you were a good man. When no one else would, I assisted him. Thought perhaps you could do the same for me. Keanu exhaled slowly and looked steady. You're making things tough for me. He stated his opinion, yet I can't disregard it. Let someone in need go outdoors and discuss this. We don't have to get involved. The man hesitated throughout the entire cafe, obviously considering his options before. He answered, nodding fine, but we need to move. They could appear quickly at any. Keanu maintained his composed demeanor for a minute, exuding a calm authority that appeared. He resorted to F in order to calm the man, who continued to hold onto the table. Gently, Keanu murmured, I'll stay here, tight. Ethan's wide eyes filled with anticipation. Are you certain? He asked Keanu with concern. Nodded, giving the kid a comforting. He said, smile, everything will be all right. Brave enough to forewarn me, but I refuse to. With that, Keanu and the dude, forget it. Exited the cafe and went outside. As they walked, the chilly air struck them. Onto the road, the far-off noises of the quiet was broken by vehicles and conversation. Keanu, whatever was about to happen next, was aware that it wouldn't simply alter this man's. It could alter his own life as well. The crisp air seemed colder outside the cafe. As the man and Keanu Reeves entered the street and the city's busy noises, life stood in stark contrast to the tension environment between them. Keanu seemed. His keen eyes scanned the surroundings. The man looked around for any indications of danger, taking a couple steps forward and tightening his coat. They had been observing me from surrounding him. For weeks, he spoke quietly and cautious. I am unsure about the amount of time I assumed they had fled before they closed in. You would be the best person to assist. Keanu remained composed throughout. You claim that they believe you have. What was it that made the man pause? Observing him from behind as though Then, the shadows themselves came to life from under his coat. He extracted a tiny, weathered. This envelope, he added, passing it to Keanu. Keanu accepted the envelope as his own, fingertips stroking its tattered borders. He cautiously opened it to see a couple vintage photos and a handwritten letter. The images displayed a collection of individuals, such as the man's sibling, standing on what looked like a movie screen. Placed the letter, but Keanu's focus right away. The words were written hastily in handwriting. Find Keanu Reeves if anything happens to me. He will know how to win Keanu's affection. As he read the message, his muscles tensed. It was an request for assistance from a person who had trusted his good nature and of justice, and prior to Keanu's reaction, the man tensed up and fixed his gaze on someone or something on the other side of the roadway. He whispered, his voice filled with. Keanu followed the man's eyes in terror. I observed two men exiting a dark-clad SUV parked next to the curb. Suits, they purposefully moved their eyes, looking around before landing on the man with whom they are not speaking is. Keanu's voice was steady as he asked. Number they'll do, the man said, shaking his head. Whatever it takes to achieve their goals. Keanu has tucked the envelope into. With his thoughts whirling, he put A, firmly grasping the man's shoulder. Calm down, we'll work this out. The men in suits walked across the street. They're deliberate and Keanu positioned himself purposefully, a little in front of the man's serene presence, now radiating a silent power. Keanu said, Gentlemen, as the men listened to his voice, even something I can assist you with. The tall man, and broad-shouldered, came to a halt several feet away. His piercing eyes darted between. This is Keanu and the man behind him. Does it worry you, he added in a tone that clipped. Step aside. Since Keanu didn't move, I'm worried about the other man now. Smiling, shorter but no less menacing. You have no idea who you're interacting with. Do you think Keanu's serene grin didn't? I might say the same thing to waver. The tension crackled like. As the two sides squared off, electrical. The taller man moved towards his, reaching for the pocket of his jacket. The voice of Keanu pierced the. I would never do that. Tension like a blade. If I were you, there would have been anything regarding. His voice was steady, firm, and unwavering that offered the guys a brief pause before they paused, uncertain about whether to listen to Keanu's voice continue. You believe this man has something steady? Whatever it is that you desire, but it's not worth the work you're going to do. The shorter man's eyes sharpened. You don't. Keanu stepped forward to frighten us. Powerful presence, yet I'm not attempting to. I'm attempting to frighten you away from committing an error. You'll. The taller man looked at his remorse, uncertainty about his companion flashing in his eyes. But the shorter man wasn't confident that we won't go without him. Keanu sighed as he spoke in a chilly tone. Serene exterior that is unbroken. You will then need to go through me, he said. Uttered, the words weighed heavily on the air. The two men's unspoken meaning looked at each other, the weight of the moment where a few tense people are experiencing. No one moved for a few seconds, as though reaching. The men took a stride after reaching a quiet accord. This isn't about the shorter man, back. Spoke with a tone tinged with menace Keanu's. As they turned, their eyes remained fixed on one another, and made their way back to their SUV. The man behind the automobile as it drove off. Keanu breathed shakily, but you didn't. Must do that, he added, and Keanu looked to his face. I did soften him, he said. I'm not going because you trusted me. To allow you to confront this. The man's eyes, by themselves, gleamed with thankfulness. I'm at a loss for words. Keanu smiled slightly, but you don't. You really must stop running away from this. We'll work things out jointly, and they both stood on. Finally, the tension in the comm street. Keanu realized that this wasn't the. Ultimately, it was just the start of a bigger conflict as the black SUV. Keanu vanished into the distance. Looked at the man's composed expression, changing to one of concentration and determination. We must determine what they're pursuing and the reason they believe you're involved, he stated. The man nodded, still trembling, but it was clear. More serene in Keanu's presence. This is what he said, drawing another piece of folded paper from his. My brother, it's a document in my coat pocket. I believe he left me before he passed away. Associated with a scandal of some sort, but Keanu, I never really understood it. Unfurled the paper carefully with his sharp eyes, skimmed over the text lines that certain anomalous transactions connected to a strong corporation. The more deeply he go through, the more obvious it was that this wasn't simply any document that served as proof of corruption in the public's pursuit of the individual. Would do whatever it took to bury. Your brother showed courage by keeping this. Keanu spoke in a respectful tone. However, clinging to it puts you at risk. The man sagged his shoulders, but I didn't. I had no idea who to ask or what to do. To have faith in you till Ethan informed me about you. Keanu's face became softer at the reference to Ethan. The child has the courage to intervene. He might have kept us both alive. And the two went back to the cafe today, where Ethan sat nervously at the table. His expression brightened as he waited for them. Relief upon witnessing Keanu's passage. The door, you're all right, Keanu exclaimed, kneeling and grinning warmly. Down to look into Ethan's eyes because of you. According to Ethan, you accomplished something really crucial today. You alerted me when nobody else would, and as a result, we're. Ethan's eyes grew wide with a mix of Disbelief and pride were head over him. He said, "I just wanted to help." Silently, "And you did," Keanu answered. Retrieved a folded sheet of paper from. Ethan had seen the note in his pocket earlier, "But I still have work to accomplish. I need your assistance." Once more throughout the following hour, Keanu, Ethan, and the two men collaborated in the bistro. Keanu called a few people to come up with a plan. His authoritative yet composed voice. The man was reassured that they were taking the appropriate actions will be taken in this. Keanu gave the authorities an explanation, "But we must ensure that it is carried out safely. Those that follow you won't give up readily, but we reveal the reality." Ethan listened carefully to his impressionable mind, taking in every word. "But what about the negative people?" His tone was colored with worry. Keanu grinned reassuredly. "Don't be concerned about them. Stated that when you act morally, there's always a method to stand firm against the incorrect." A few days later, the proof was transferred to a reliable investigator. Keanu himself has personally screened the documents, and the man's story became the focal point of a scandal that rocked the influential. Fundamental to the company, Ethan had spent the majority of his childhood being ignored and disregarded, became his own hero. Keanu made certain that he and the man were both shielded and assisted, giving them an opportunity to repair their. Months later, Ethan was sitting in a new cafe, this time as a visitor of honor. The man who used to be afraid next to him for his life grinned now, unburdened by the under threat. Keanu joined them in warm presence that is as stable as ever for you too. I learned something from Keanu's remarks about rearing a bravery in a silent toast with a glass of water. Doesn't originate from might or strength. Arises from doing morally even when it's difficult. Ethan smiled proudly. Transformation from a scared boy to a brave one. A tale that would inspire young men. Many as they exchanged stories and laughed. The warm glow of the cafe appeared brighter. More than ever a representation of the lives transformed by an act of bravery and kindness.